Hi guys, today we're going to work on a 570 Sportsman ACE. We're going to show you how to change the clutching on this, but it also is pretty much the same setup on a 570 RZR and a 570 Ranger, as long as they don't have EBS on them. Alright, so what we did, we jacked up the machine, make sure it's safe and stuff for you. Took the driver's side left rear tire off, and then we also removed the greaser here. That just gives you more room to get the clutch cover off. To speed up the thing, we also remove these clutch cover bolts. There's, I think, 8 of them all the way around here. So just remove that, and then pull the clutch cover off. That's going to reveal the clutches, but before you do that, if there's grease or anything on here, you just want to wipe that clean, because you don't want to get that on the belt or on any of the clutches. So just make sure you take a paper towel or something and wipe it clean. Make sure your hands are clean before you grab any of that stuff. And then we'll work on the clutches. This is going to be your primary clutch or the drive clutch. This is actually on your motor. This is going to be your secondary clutch or the German clutch on your transmission. We'll kind of go through and take them apart for you. What you want to do to get the primary clutch off is you're going to need a small bar like this or a big screwdriver, whatever works. And you stick it through the clutch, and you just got to be careful of 2 things. One, you want to hit on this outside tower. I don't know if the camera can see it, but you don't want to be on this inside part here where the spider's sliding up and down, because you can damage that and you'll wreck your clutch buttons. The other thing you got to be careful of is wherever your bar is resting, make sure you're not going to take out electrical wire or breaker line or anything like that. Make sure it rests on the frame, or you have somebody hold it in place for you. And then you just take out the bolt. When you do pull it off, there's a little plastic spacer in here. Sometimes that'll stay in the clutch. If it stays in there, just kind of wiggle, put the bolt back in and wiggle it and pull it out, and it'll normally come out with you. But you got to have that other, use the clutch puller. Once you got that out, this is the clutch puller. This is part number PCP1. It's the primary clutch puller for all the 570s. You can also use our shorter one, which is the PCP12. That'll work on this model too. Basically, you just thread it in there. You want to thread it in by hand and do all this stuff by hand. You don't want to use an impact on this, especially being right on the crankshaft of your motor and stuff. You can damage the clutch puller, the clutch, or your crankshaft, so you just got to be careful. You tighten it up by hand, and what you do is you're going to turn this and just get this to rest on the frame or something. Make sure you're not hitting any wires. And you'll just tighten it, and sometimes it slides right off, sometimes it'll make a big pop noise. This one came off pretty easy. And once it's loose, you can see it's loose, it's moving off there. Just unthread the clutch puller. Pull out your bar, and then pull out the clutch. So there's your primary clutch off. And then on your secondary clutch, make sure you keep track of all your washers on here and the bolt. And this one's, this clutch comes apart in 2 halves. So you'll pull this outer half out. Sometimes you might have to rotate to get all the way off. The one thing to watch on these is most of them are going to have one gold washer that comes off. Sometimes it's going to be stuck up in here, and if it is, you just pull the clutch towards you, pull back, and you grab the washer. Sometimes it falls in. Some models might have more than one, so just pay attention, see, and make sure you keep track of those. I always just leave it right in here, that way you know where it's at. And it's pretty easy, just pull the belt off. One other thing to watch on this is how the belt's in there. You should have it, so this is the OEM belt on here, so you can read the numbers from left to right, just like you would normally read. However, the belt is on there. If you're using that same belt, you got to put the belt on the same way. If you put a new belt on, you always want to put it so you can read the numbers and stuff. Some of them will have an arrow, some will have numbers on them, but that's how you decide which way the belt goes. Put that off in a nice spot. You need to pull this off. And here's the back side of your clutch. Alright, so now we got your primary clutch. What I always tell people to do is put an X here, here, and here. That way when you clean everything up and line everything up, everything goes back together the same way, because they are balanced, so you want to make sure they're correct when you put them back together. Once you do that, this is our clutch compression tool, the CCT 510. Works both on the primary and the secondary clutch, but we'll just slide this down on there carefully. The reason you want to use this tool is that it takes everything down nice and evenly, doesn't cock it off to one side or another and do any damage to your bushings at all. It's the best way to use it. You know, so if you have some compression tools of some sort, that's the better way to do it. We'll just buzz these out real quick. If you are doing this by hand, the best way to do it is have two people do it. Have one person hold down on the clutch and the other person take out the bolts, and once you get all the bolts out, then you can slowly let it come up. Because it is under spring tension, it can fly up and hit you, but you can also do damage to this bushing. I'll show you the bushing here as soon as I get it off. So there's a bushing right here in the clutch, so as your machine's being used, you got to make sure that it's not sloppy loose and worn out when you're taking this apart anyways. But if you get this on here and it's cocked one way or another, as you either loosen or tighten the bolts, it can damage that soft bushing there. So just be careful of that. Once you get that off, pull out your spring. This is the stock spring in here. And you want to pull out your weights. It's just an Allen wrench on one side, an 1/8 inch Allen wrench, and a 3/8 wrench on the other. Just take these off. So this is what your stock weight looks like, and going to the EPI weight, it's different profiles on the shape of them, different gram weight of them, so there's a lot of differences there that we switch out. So we'll put this in there, just like the other one came out. Put your bolt through, line everything up. Tighten up the nut. Now this is a good time, when you got your spring out and the cover off, you can move the clutch up and down nice and free. So the best thing to do is, you know, if you take it off of here and take it to the air hose, blow it out really good. Also always check, you can check this beforehand too, but this one has a two-way bearing because it doesn't have EBS on it, which is the engine braking. So this should turn both ways. It doesn't, you can't spin it and it won't like turn really crazy fast or anything, but it should rotate both directions. I know it's kind of hard to see in the video, but just check that. If it's locking up or not turning free, you might have to change that at the same time. The other thing you do is just take an air hose, blow it out really good. Another good thing to do is take like a clean Scotch-Brite pad, emery cloth, real light sandpaper, and start from the outside edge and go in and just kind of work your way all the way around the clutches. This is pretty much a brand new one, so we won't do it here just to save time. But you do that on both sides of the clutches, and then you spray some brake cleaner on here and just wipe it down and wipe all the way down with your all the way around the clutches. That'll take all the belt glazing, all the belt residue, and any other dirt and dust that's on there. So nothing too hard. And once you get that in there, it's just a matter of switching to whatever spring and weights you're going to put in there. Put the spring back in. When you are cleaning out the clutch and flipping it around and stuff, there is a little blue washer. This is a spacer on here. You do want to make sure that stays in there so it doesn't cause any issues. Sometimes you take an air hose, it might fly off there. You're flipping up, working on stuff, it'll fall off. So just keep track of that. Once you get your spring in there, then it's just a matter of lining up your X's. Make sure the spring seats flat on both ends, and then just tighten this down. Again, you don't want to just put one bolt in and tighten it, because it'll cock it and damage the bushing. So you just either hold it down tight or use a tool like this. Once you get those, you just put your bolts back in. And I don't torque them going real light on the impact. It's going in aluminum, so you can't strip them out. And then tighten them by hand. And I just use a little stubby wrench so you don't over tighten them. If you don't have a tool like this and you are doing it by hand, you want to make sure that you go like every other, just like you're putting on a tire, like a crisscross pattern on there, so you don't damage anything. And then you're pretty much done. It's just unbolt it out of the holding tool. And one other thing to kind of just wipe clean and dry out is this back here. Sometimes they just get rusted up and corroded, or there might be oil, grease, whatever on it. Just take some light brake cleaner, just wipe it out, and that way you got a good clean mating surface to go on your crankshaft again. And that's your primary clutch. Alright, so now we're going to work on the secondary clutch. This is the backside, so when it's on your machine, this is going to be up against the machine. And one thing to note on here is there's a big X right here, and then there's also a corresponding X right here. And when we put all this back together, we're going to have to make note of that so we line it up with the X on the other half of the clutch, so everything's lined properly and stuff for that. So once we got that out, we'll show you how to do here. Basically what I like to do is just break these loose by hand, just go around all the way, and I've cracked some of these loose already. And you don't want to take them all the way out because this has got spring tension on it. But once you get them loose, we'll throw it in the, again, it's the CCT 510 clutch compression tool. Thread down the adapter. And then you just want to remove the, when you tighten this down, you don't need hardly anything. You just put a little tension on it, nothing crazy, because you don't want to bend this metal plate or this cup in here. So you just tighten that up a little bit, and then you just loosen these up. This is a T30 on these, and you can either do it with a wrench or a screwdriver, or a torque screwdriver. I wouldn't suggest using an impact on these either. They tend to strip out pretty easy. Both the threads in the clutch and the bolt head on this bolt itself. Once you get these out, we'll slowly let this come up, and that'll let the spring come out nice and safe and slow. And it's a little spring, but it's a pretty stiff little spring. And there's really no alignment on this plate here, so you can mark it if you want to, but it's not necessary to get in the exact same holes. You just let it thread up. Off, you can loosen this up. And then you can see this is a two-piece unit. There's a little cup in there. Again, you just got to be careful when you're compressing this and taking it apart and putting it together. You don't bend this plate up at all. And pull your spring out. Once your spring's out, your clutch is open and free. You can see inside there. Good thing, just like the other clutch, blow it all good with air. Again, take some Scotch-Brite or Scotch pad and just kind of work up and down all the way around. just keep rotating all the way through, clamp, and then wipe it down with brake cleaner. Once you get that done, blow it out again, put it back together, set it in there. This is one thing, they don't give you a whole lot of room for the spring to sit on there, so whatever spring you're putting in there, just make sure it's seated good and square on there, and not tilted one way or another. So once you get the spring in, just make sure it's sitting flat and good in there, and then put this on. And this is going to move around in a little bit, so you don't have to worry about that until you get too close to tightening up the bolts. You can kind of line up the holes as you go down. And just tighten this back down. And before you tighten it all the way up, I like to leave it just a 1/16 of an inch off or so, because a lot of times when you get here, I don't know if you can see it, but the holes aren't always lined up, so you can kind of grab on this tool and move around and line it up, or you might have to slide the clutch back and forth, because the clutch isn't 100% centered and stuff, so it takes a little bit of playing around sometimes to get it. But what I do is I just start one and just hand tighten it a little bit, and that normally gives you a pivot point to get the rest of them lined up pretty easily, and then just go around and tighten them up. And then you're just going to tighten them down. Nothing crazy, just repeat the step for the other bolts. Now once you get close to being tight, you can crank this down a little bit more. Again, being careful not to bend that plate or anything. You don't need a whole lot of tension. But then as you do that, you'll tighten up all, is it 5 or 6 bolts? 5 bolts on this one. And just save some camera time. We'll get these tightened up and get back to it. Alright, so we got all the bolts tightened up now. And it's pretty much just remove this nut, slide this back off, pull the clutch off, and you're pretty much good to go. We'll show you how to put them back on the machine. Alright, so now to put the clutches back on the machine, you just slide them on. Sometimes that's a little tight, just slide it back on, but make sure it bottoms on the back. And then you want to put that one on first, and then put the primary clutch on. And to do the primary clutch, you just want to just kind of put a square on as crankshaft as you can, so it's nice and square. And then you grab the bolt. Again, doing this all by hand, tightening up. Don't want to use an impact fitting on that because you can damage too much stuff. Then you'll need to take small bar just like you did to loosen it. You'll need to hold that in place to tighten it. And on this one, it's 47 to 50 foot-pounds to be torqued to tighten it. Torque it down. Good there. Remember again to make sure that your bar isn't going on this section here. You want to be on the outside of these towers hitting on that. Once you have that done, you need to grab the belt. And again, make sure that you can read the numbers or whatever direction you took it off, it's going the same direction. If it's new belt, I always put it so the arrow's going forward, or you can read the numbers. And one thing I always remember when you're putting these on, this machine's pretty much new, so it's nice and clean. But if you're using an old one that's dirty or greasy or anything like that, you want to keep the belt off the grease and the dirt. And also same thing with your clutches and everything with your hands and stuff too. So if you leave the belt sitting like this, just make sure it's not sitting in anything dirty. Then to put the secondary together, You got to make sure you remember this gold washer goes in there. This machine only had one, some might have others. And then the other thing to pay attention to is, as I showed you earlier, there's an X right here. And then on your outside cover, you'll be an X right here. And what that does is you have to line those two X's up, and you'll either be there or 180 degrees off. You want to make sure that you line up all the X's when you assemble it together. So as you put this together, one other thing to inspect when you got these apart, make sure your rollers are in good shape. They're nice and round, no flat spots. They turn free. If not, you might need to replace those also. But then my X is right here. I'm going to start with my X on the bottom. It'll kind of slide into place. Now you might have to move the belt up and down a little bit. Actually, I have to put the machine in here real quick. Sometimes it's easier if the machine's in here, that way the clutch shaft doesn't move as much. But you might need to hold up, like pick up on the top of the belt, and that'll pull it through. But then as you go, the clutch will slide on the splines farther. And as you can see, it's not all the way on there. There's a good chunk, or a good almost inch of splines that go on the shaft yet. So it's just a matter of, you got to rotate that in more as you go. And then once you get to a certain point, like now, you can put this bolt in, and this gets tightened up to 36 to 38 foot-pounds. But the best thing I found to do to tighten that up is again put the machine back in neutral. Wait, turns a little bit easier for you. And then you can tighten up by hand and torque it down. For the video, I'm just going to show you, but you don't want to just put an impact on and tighten right up, because you can get that belt pinch in there. And that'll do two things. It can damage your belt or your clutch, and also if it tightens up, once the belt moves, your bolt's going to be loose. So just kind of tighten it up a little bit at a time, and you'll kind of feel it go in. But then just keep turning it and keep going. I don't think I'm neutral yet. And then just keep rotating it through. And as you do that, that's going to work the belt evenly out to the outside edge of the clutch. And then keep tightening it up. And once you notice the clutch will get to a certain point where it won't go in any farther, just keep rotating it around and around. And once you get to that point, then you can torque it and you get to that 36 to 38 foot-pounds, and you know you're good. I'll give it a quick buzz here just for the speed up the video. Once you got that done, just make sure you got all your parts and pieces there. It's just a matter of putting on your clutch cover. It usually fits right tight in here, and it kind of pops right into place. Like that. And then put these bolts in. Don't go super crazy. These are just getting the plastic, so if you tighten them too much, they'll strip out. But you put these bolts in, make sure you put your greaser back in. Tire back on, you should be good to go. If you have any questions or anything on this or any other ones, just give us a call at EPI.